Hello and welcome to the Real Estate Regroup Show. I am your host, LJ Walker, a real estate investor helping you realize your dreams of owning a home or investing in one. Today, I'd like to address the question, what to do if someone dies on your property? If you've been listening to the news, you may have seen where there were 3 people vacationing in Mexico who died from carbon dioxide or monoxide. Then you had Shanquella, who was killed again in Mexico by a group that she was traveling with, or 1 or 2 members in the group that she was traveling with. That story is so bizarre to me. I'm not going to go into grave detail with that. But I thought it would definitely, because of what's been happening, that I would address this issue to landlords, Airbnb hosts, and also to vacationers who stay at hotels, all right? And also possibly those of you who want to own a hotel as well. So, first and foremost, let me say this. People, when it comes to death, out of the 3, out of Airbnb, their home or hotel, it's actually a little bit more common for people to die at a hotel. All right. People die from heart attacks. People die from suicides. For whatever reason, people like to go to a hotel and do it there. And then, of course, unfortunately, murder also happens, and it happens more frequently at hotels than it does anywhere else. But that is not to say that it doesn't happen in the other places. Okay, so before we even talk about or go any further as to death, the one thing that all of us should do is read our insurance policy. Why? Because most homeowners' insurances may not necessarily cover that type of liability. They may cover the liability if a person gets hurt, but for whatever reason, some of them will not cover if the person is murdered or commits suicide. Okay. The other thing is, many people who have turned their homes into Airbnb, what some of them don't realize is that their homeowner's insurance does not cover Airbnb short-term rentals at all. Because there are some people who have short-term rentals, but they're not on Airbnb. All right. Now, what I did look up and I did see is that very recently, Airbnb has something called Air Cover, which is their insurance policy. But you don't get that unless you are listed on Airbnb, right? Now, they've upgraded the policy. They've upgraded how much you're covered for. But again, it says if your guests get hurt, right? And it doesn't appear, it's not clear to me whether or not they cover murder. When it comes to, and the reason why I say this is because I saw on their site where they do encourage hosts to have smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, but they don't require it. What they do say is that as a guest, you should ask your host whether or not they have a carbon monoxide detector. See that? Now, I know in New York, it's required by the state. So, and that was before Airbnb even existed. So, there you go. make sure you're covered by insurance, no matter who you are. Next thing, of course, is I'm going to recommend when it does happen, I would call the police right away, and then I would call a lawyer. Especially if it's a murder, I'm calling the police, period. I'm not going to play detector gadget and do any kind of investigation, okay? Because if they were murdered, especially, I don't want that murderer who may still be in my home to turn around and try and kill me. You understand? So I would call the police right away. If you have an Airbnb remotely and your maid finds somebody dead, I would tell the maid, call the police right away. And while she's calling the police, you should be calling a lawyer, preferably. I have Legal Shield. I'm an associate, so if anyone is interested, definitely reach out. Next, let's talk more specifically to each group. Landlords. For those of you who are landlords, you got to know, like everything, each state is going to be different on how you should handle death. Okay? And not only once it happens, but even when you're trying to rent out a place to someone after someone has died. In some states, a landlord doesn't have to say anything at all. In other states, a landlord does have to say if and only if they are asked by the new prospective tenant or the new tenant whether or not somebody died in that particular apartment. And then other states like New York, you have to tell the people whether they ask you or not. You have to tell that new tenant, hey, somebody died here. That's why the apartment's empty. So again, check with your lawyer to find out what you can and can't say after the body has been removed and you put the apartment back together. Now, if someone has died in your apartment, when it happens, after you call the police and everything, it varies by city as far as emptying the property. But typically, you can't just go in there and throw their stuff away. You can't. Most places, you have 30 days or until the lease ends. All right? Others may take longer, especially if it has to go through probate. Essentially, the family, the next of kin for the person who's deceased, they are going to be responsible for paying you rent. Once it's cleared, then you can make changes. All right? But basically, the family is supposed to move everything out. I know with my family, because my aunt died last year, so we actually had, until the landlord did have us stay there until everything, the paperwork processed and ended. But hers was really a co-op more so than a regular apartment, which is a whole different can of worms. But we did get enough time. But when, like 1 month before time was up, we had a whole year. 1 month before it ended, they did send us a letter saying, hey, I hope you know that you got to have everything cleared by this particular time. Okay, so that was done, and that was done in writing, and that's something you're going to have to do as well. Again, play it safe. Contact a lawyer in your state and find out how it is supposed to be done. But basically, that is how the process is. And yes, they can evict you file an eviction on you, even though that's not your apartment, even though that is the apartment of your relative. Same thing with a house. As a matter of fact, there's a note that I was looking at where they were going to foreclose on this lady. She inherited the house from her aunt, actually, similar situation. She inherited it, but she didn't pay the mortgage, and mortgage was due, and she didn't pay the taxes, and taxes were past due. Okay, so they were foreclosing on the niece. So yes, that's why it's also important to let your relatives know. If you're going to pass property down to them, you need to let them know who they need to pay the mortgage to and who they need to pay the taxes to. That's why a lot of people lose their family property. All right. Next, homeowners. I probably should address the homeowners first. All right. Let's say you're a homeowner and you're selling a property and someone died on that property. If it's within a 3-year period, typically across the board, you got to say something. If it's been more than 3 years, you may not have to. Again, go to a lawyer and find out, do you need to tell prospective buyers whether or not somebody died on the property or not? All right, next, hotels. Now, when deaths occur in hotels, right, either through overdose, heart attack, suicide, murder, no matter what it is, they go to the authorities. The authorities normally seal off the room. They're not allowed to put that room up and try to have a visitor or a guest come and stay in that particular room. It's sealed off. Okay? And the authorities will not release that particular room back to the hotel. I mean, the hotel cannot get into that room until the authorities release that room back to the hotel owners, right? Now, unfortunately, some hotels don't do a proper cleaning, but you do have, I would say most do. There is what they call death cleanup professionals who will go in and do a deep clean, because especially if it's a murder, blood is going to be everywhere, right? Normally. So they got to deep clean the carpet. They got to go into the grout. They may replace the beds. A lot of times they do replace the beds altogether, because there have been instances where people have been stuffed in mattresses. A lot of times they also replace pictures. They do deep cleans because, sometimes that HVAC, sometimes that blood gets into the HVAC. That has to be cleaned. Toilets have to be thoroughly disinfected. Especially nowadays, it's like imperative. So a lot of people who are, hotel owners and what have you, they get death cleanup professionals. If you're an Airbnb person, you might want to also get a death cleanup professional, or thoroughly train and supervise whoever you are hiring to clean, because some of these cleaners, oh boy, some of these cleaners are horrible. Some of these cleaners are nasty themselves. I don't even know why they chose to call themselves cleaners and get into the cleaning business. But yes, you need to supervise them, because unfortunately you can be sued if it hasn't been done thoroughly. If the property has not been maintained and deep cleaned and disinfected properly. So guys, I'm sharing this with you because, especially in light of what's been happening for a while now, I feel as though all of us, we need to be on our A game with this thing, right? Because we're not completely clear of this pandemic either, on top of everything else. So I just hope that the information I just shared with you will help you make smart financial moves. Feel free to pass this amongst your friends. Remember, each one, reach one, teach one. Also, if you're on YouTube, click like and subscribe. All right, until next time, have a good night.